Aloha. Aloha. Kakayaka e komo mai. Kakayaka, good morning. E komo mai means welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I want to thank Reverend Deb and everybody who's helped me put this thing together today. Thank you very much for joining us, friends and family, and guests, honored guests. It's really a joy for me to be here. This mic's not working. Okay, excuse me. She said the blue one matched me better. So wow, gosh, this is my first time in presentation of Hawaiian stuff in front of an audience. Usually I do it with them sitting behind me, so I could do that. I could just do it this way, and then everybody will feel a little more comfortable. At least I'd feel a little more comfortable. No, it's all good though. I first arrived on the island about 2002, and it was quite a transition. As I first came here, it was like a welcoming of the aloha spirit and an immediate connection with the culture. My first interactions with Kapunas was Uncle Robert over there in Puna district, and some of the Hawaiian culture working through the farmers markets, and we did our Hawaiian vacation 10 days for $2,500, including airfare. From that first visit, I knew this is where I wanted to be to retire. Why not make this, if I have to work, why not work where I want to retire to? So wow, what a great place to do that. It took us 8 years to put it all together. And so putting it all together, we ended up moving 9 of us out here. So my now ex-wife was instrumental in making that organization happen. But I have family and friends all around the island, and it's really cool because I'm never more than a day away from home. I came from a trucking background, 40 years in the cab of a truck, 4 million miles, as this was just the midway point of my life that was always kind of outside of society. I was raised in the Chicagoland area, but come from a family that moved, shall we say, just a lot. About 13 times before I got to the 6th grade. Every time we'd move, we came back to a new apartment, new furniture, new life, and everything was changed. Yeah, it was kind of a crime syndicate background. And so in that, I was always outside of society and always, do I get a social security number? Do I do all this? Went through a name change about 9 years old in witness protection. Then into a life of trucking from the time I was like 12. But growing up this way, it brought me to learn to meet friends and make acquaintances so easily. As going through school, I knew I had to interact and become part of, well, it just brought me up in a different way. And I didn't understand it then going through it, but now it all makes sense. Because now what it brought me to is a point where I was so willing to learn from everybody I met along the way, looking for the knowledge, and as my interest driving trucks around the United States, grew into geology. I would find a geology professor in a truck stop and pick his brain till 3 in the morning. I never missed an opportunity to learn from everybody. Even the bum on the street was able to teach me what I didn't want to be, if nothing else. And so I was taught because my father went through this spiritual conversion pretty early in my life. As I was going through the name change, he got into yoga, meditation, studying Paramahansa Yogananda, breath work, pranayama. So I did yoga and breath work growing up in rest areas, and they were vegetarians, and outside of society, we turned the CB radio off. We never had one. And working our way across country, it was 7 to 10 months at a time on the road, and then a couple of weeks at grandma's was what we called home. So totally from little trip to little trip, as interacting with family, meeting new people all across the country, it always was able to interrupt the people's little trips. And so I lived aloha my whole life because I recognized it was all BS. And all the stories that the truck drivers were talking was just the most cockamamie thing they could think of during the day, and then let's find somebody gullible enough to believe it at night. And so I refused to participate, and so I was quiet. If I didn't have something real to say, I didn't say anything at all. And then I spent a lot of years hitchhiking as the cab of the truck got a little crowded with the little sister, mom and dad, and myself. And so I did some hitchhiking from the time I was about 14. I said to my father, I said, it's time for me to go out on my own. And I hitchhiked down the road, and they passed me. And I hitchhiked down the road, they passed me again. And that was the last time I saw them for about 6 years. And so it was really something else to have that first Christmas where you didn't even know where your parents were. But no, I never had a home. So it was definitely an adventure in life, as being ready to sleep in a school bus or in an abandoned house or wherever you were under a bridge, but always had what I needed to make the travel. I was always prepared, backpack, sleeping bag music, and clothes, kept myself clean. I know I can keep myself clean in a truck stop, restroom, anywhere in the country. I could always take care of myself being on the road. And so in that, if I tried to stop and settle down, I went hungry. And it was like, by the time I figured it out, it was like 7 days one time I went without eating, and I knew I couldn't live on the beach. There was no food there. You know, so it's like back on the road I went, and traveling to Oregon, and spent one winter in California at Lake Tahoe, and another winter in Chicago with my cousins and my uncle who had a used furniture store, became a piano mover, met my first wife in northern Minnesota, 20 years with my first marriage, trucking when my father passed away in 1980. And right about the deregulation, my first wife and I spent 9 years together traveling 48 states in the trucking industry as a husband and wife team, doing household goods, moving in 8 to 9 months at a time out on the road, and living in the cab of a truck with all the camping gear, exploring all the state parks, national parks, and climbing to the top of the mountain from the rest area. It didn't matter, just ready to go and experience life. Having epiphanies along the way, and it's just been a great transition as now I'm part of a community, as it's just evolved into, okay, all those things I went through make total sense now with the transition that I'm going through. And so now it's really an honor for me to share some of the things I've come to learn and love about the island. As they embraced me, I felt like I've had a spiritual connection with the Aina as I embrace it. And so when you remove the mask, the true meaning of aloha is that energy moving through you, and the Hawaiian aloha is Aramaic for the word of God. And so the connections within the Hawaiian culture, showing the 12 tribes of Israel connection, what they call the 14 tribes of Israel, as Ethiopia is one of the lost tribes, and the Hawaiian culture is one of the lost tribes of Israel. And so finding about the connections and the spirituality of the Hawaiian culture, I found it truly fascinating as they had no discrepancy with the missionaries that arrived here in 1820, as they were easily to accept the Christianity because it was a direct reflection of their own true philosophy. King Ka'a'o come up from Tahiti, according to the Kumalino, the Hawaiian creation story, as the King Ka'a'o come up from Tahiti about the year 1200, instituted the four-god system, the human sacrifice, and these things that we know about the Hawaiian culture that are not of the Christian faith. But the original Hawaiian culture is definitely part of that 12 tribes of Israel, and new medallions surfacing showing the Pacific Pyramid of what was the Hawaiian culture. The Pacific Pyramid, the top of the pyramid is the Hawaiian Islands. The left branch is the Maoris of New Zealand, and the right branch, the Easter Isle, and the natives that made the Moji statue. Fascinating statues, 37 feet tall, 270 tons, that we have no idea how they built them. Technologies that were lost. Finding similar technologies in use here on the island with the kahunas, and the stories of the kahunas intrigued me. I found myself studying at the library even before I knew I was going to become a tour guide. And the stories of the kahunas working, Max Freedom Long was the assistant curator of the Bishop Museum, and his encounters with kahunas under the protection, walking on lava lakes. And I hear stories of miraculous healings where a participant in the party hiking through the mountain broke a leg, and the kahuna held the broken leg, and it dematerialized and rematerialized whole and healthy in front of witnesses. Fascinating, miraculous things. I've talked with natives in Hohokena that talk about kahuna from that area, Hohokena, walking to Maui Island regularly over the surface of the water. And it's just like Jesus said, these and greater things you'll be able to do, Hawaiian culture was doing through their kahunas. The kahunas were the keepers of the knowledge, as every aspect of Hawaiian culture had to have a kahuna, the keeper of that knowledge. What was a vast, flourishing population at the time of Captain Cook's arrival on the island is truly fascinating. Captain Cook's, in his own journals, estimated at about 400,000 people. The Hawaiian culture that I talked with estimated more towards 2 million on this island alone. The vast, flourishing population in the Apua'a system, the land divisions of slices of pie that go from the wide section on the ocean and up to the mountain, everything they needed, no freedom to travel, and that's why the people that did travel, they always were met with the haka, the aggression. Find out your intent. As the Maori still use this verbal, facial expression of aggression to find out your intent. And so there was no freedom to travel in the Apua'a system. People that were traveling, we had to know what you were doing. Some travel was for trade kukui nuts, the obsidian glass, and the bluestone, the stone tools of the Hawaiian culture. fascinating stuff with the culture and the way that they actually were able to flourish without any needs from shipments from the mainland at a population somewhere between 2 million and 400,000. It's mind-boggling. We'd be starving in a week. Our grocery stores would be empty. Yeah. And they had everything they needed. The island of Molokai, said to have a population called the Garden Isle of 1 million people itself on the island of Molokai. And now from the time Captain Cook's arrival, the scurvy sailors, he actually discovered Australia in 1776. And then in 1778, he discovered the Hawaiian Islands, said to be navigating using a watch and a sextant, looking for an eclipse. And so he came across the Pacific Ocean looking for the Venus eclipse of transit on the sun. And so searching for the transit of Venus, he found the Hawaiian Islands. But the sailors on board that ship were from the jails of England. They were a scurvy lot, and they had all kinds of disease with them, and even the common cold was something the Hawaiians had no resistance to. And so the devastation to the Hawaiian Polynesian was just genocide. There's no other way. It was biological warfare, but it was unaware. From the population's estimated 2 million to 400,000, depleted down to 33,000 left in 38 years. It's just mind-boggling. What the Hawaiian culture we see today are remnants of a flourishing society that had a structure of government, a structure of kahunas and elites and workers and warriors. And within their body of government, they had everything they needed. Everybody had a place, and nobody was homeless. And as long as the Aina, the head of the Kino, was flourishing, all the fingers and toes of the body of government was flourishing. All the people flourished if the Aina flourished. And so when the Hawaiians make the symbols of the mountain and the connection of that 1 year birth celebration to the Aina itself, they take the piko of the baby and they hold it for that first year. In old Polynesia, mortality rates weren't all that great. And so the first year when the baby was born, they would give the baby an ugly name in hopes that the spirits would go by the baby and not take notice. And then at the 1 year birth celebration, the piko, the belly button of the baby, is placed in the puka along the petroglyph marks. The lines of puka showing the whole genealogy of that family. The piko in the puka, a capstone on top, and a direct connection of the physical DNA of the child and the Aina itself. Lake Wailua on top of Mauna Kea, a spiritual place for this same tradition for the Hawaiian culture. The frozen lake is held permanent by permafrost, and the traditions of the Hawaiian culture putting the baby's piko at the 1 year birth celebration into Lake Wailua as part of that culture. And so when the Hawaiians make the symbol of the mountain and say, I am Mauna Kea, they truly mean in their belief system they are one with the mountain. And there's no separation of the spirit of the child and that mountain. You desecrate that soil, you hurt the people. You hurt the people, you hurt the mountain. And so when the protests on the mountain in Hawaiian culture don't even know why, but they have to protect their Aina. It's part of their tradition. And so the Western culture doesn't see it that way. And so there's this contention within what we see today. And the threads of the Polynesian culture coming up through the Kapuna groups, the older people with wisdom, still have some of the knowledge, but generation after generation of not speaking Hawaiian was almost losing everything as the missionaries made it illegal to dance. The missionaries made it illegal the kahunas. They went into hiding. And so they absolutely obliterated the Hawaiian culture. It was an attempt to wipe them out. And the United States is pretty much guilty at this, I'm sorry to say. The Polynesian culture was inundated by, 1883, the overthrow of the Queen Liliuokalani, the Hawaiian monarchy that was an established state with 40 embassies around the world, part of the League of Nations, a state with a neutral status, recognized country in the world, and overthrown by the United States government, and 12 businessmen wanting to get into plantations, Dole and Thurston. So it was all about pineapple and sugarcane for these guys, and they were the missionaries and sons of missionaries, and backed by 144 U.S. Marines with Gatling guns at the Iolani Palace, imprisoned the Queen and Prince Kohio in Oahu. And so the year of the overthrow and the coup of the Hawaiian government took place. As there's no treaties, there is no paperwork, and there's no representation for the Hawaiian culture. There's a plight for the Hawaiian people. There really is suffering here in the culture. And now they're getting back some of their traditions, and they're getting back some of their knowledge, and they're starting to stand up. But it's all about aloha with the Hawaiian culture. And it's like Gandhi with the peaceful protests. They'll make their will known, but they're not going to battle you over it. You have to come to the reality of truth and being pono. being Pono. Pono is what it's all about with the Hawaiian culture. You have to be Pono. And so if you can't do it right in your heart, then don't do it at all. And so learning about the culture and the stuff is stuff that just fascinated me. And the way they would teach their children was with the ole, the chant, the mo'olelo, the story, the mele, the song, and the pa'o, the prayer. So I just want to take a moment and address it the way the Hawaiian culture would address it, with a pa'o ole, a prayer chant. And so I'm going to start with a prayer chant, and before I start any more stories, and we're going to bring the energy up. I'm going to call it out a ku mau mau. If you guys want to repeat a ku mau mau with me, and I'll finish it one more time, and then I'll go into a Hawaiian spiritual chant, a pa'o ole. Okay? Thank you. I'm going to shut this up. A ku mau mau. A ku mau mau. A ku mau mau pa. E o mai ka. Iki mai luna mai e. Ona mea huna no e mele e o mai. E o mai ka. Iki mai luna mai e. Ona mea huna no e mele e o mai. E o mai ka. Iki mai luna mai e. Ona mea huna no e mele e. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pa'o'ole, a prayer chant, asking the Great Spirit above or our ancestors to grant us the count of the meaning of the story, done in 3 different octaves because there's different layers of kauna or meaning within all the Hawaiian stories and chants. Gives me purpose to tell them. The surface telling of the story, underlying that, why would they be telling this story to their children? And underlying that, as Reverend Deb said, our own experiences in life become our own stories. Finding out the purpose for our own stories in life, then we can tell our stories and we can learn from them and grow forward in life. And so the deeper layers of kauna, the deeper layers of meaning, sometimes you have to really seek them, but they all are in the story. And so it's really my honor to be able to share some of the Hawaiian stories and legends with you guys tonight.
I'm going to speak my heart.
Awesome.
Open.
I love this. This is too much fun. The stories of lost love in Hawaii are something fascinating. Everybody likes the stories of lost love. You guys have all seen the naupaka, the hapa flower that gazes along the ocean. And there's also a mountain variety of naupaka. It's on the mountain and it gazes down towards the ocean. It's a story of lost love, a story of forbidden love, where a kane naupaka, a Wahine princess of Hilo named Naupaka. She fell madly in love with a commoner warrior of Hilo, and it was a forbidden love. These 2 young lovers were so in love with each other, they were willing to do anything to be together. But they went to the kahuna and they said, kahuna, we must be together. There must be something you can do that we can be together. And by bringing a present, the kahuna says, no, the forbidden is forbidden, and you are forever to be separated. The Kane warrior of Hilo was cast to the mountain, forbidden to come to Hilo. And the Naupaka, the beautiful flower, as the Naupaka, the beautiful princess, was down at the ocean in Hilo, crying her eyes out. The Kane, a warrior up on the mountain, crying his eyes out. The Naupaka intertwined their vines around the 2 young lovers that night, as the plants took pity on the 2 lovers, encasing them in their spirit, the plants of the Naupaka, the story of the 2 young lovers, forever separated by the old kahuna, Naupaka of the ocean, gazing towards the mountain, Naupaka of the mountain, gazing towards the ocean. And they say if you take the Naupaka from the ocean and you bring it to the mountain, seek it out, find the Kane warrior, intertwine the vines, and for a moment in time, you can reunite the 2 young lovers of Naupaka. Wow. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. It's really a beautiful place, and there's lots of things going on here with the endemic varieties of plants and species and animals on the island. We have more extinct varieties of endemic plants than most people have in the rest of the world at all. 4,000 different varieties of birds have been found in a cave in Hawaii that we never knew existed. And so extinct varieties, 4,000 that we had no clue. But the ones we do know of outnumber any other country in the world. And so our fragile environment, the invasive species that have been brought here, a period of time of about 70 years when anything and everything was allowed to come to the island without any thoughts or ramifications, or just not any thought at all. The mongoose brought here to fight the rats, but nobody thought. The rats are nocturnal and the mongoose aren't. It's simple stuff, man. And now that we have these issues all over the island with the nene goose. The favorite food of the mongoose is the nene eggs. And so it's just one thing affects another. The nene goose is endemic, found nowhere else in the world. Special adaptations of the nene. Fascinating how an animal can evolve to a new climate and a new zone. As the nene, derived from a Canada goose, found itself off track, blown off the wind somewhere, walking around on lava fields and not having any lakes and rivers to swim in. So the nene lost all the webbing on his feet. And walking around on the lava, now develop pads on the bottom of the nene foot. I've seen nene footprints on a blotter that looks more like a puppy dog track than a goose print at all, but it has long toes. As the nene is now endemic, found nowhere else in the world. Can you believe this? The population of the nene goose went down to 33 birds left. They were saved by the William Shipman property over here at Kea'au. And the birds that were left were protected and now put on the endangered species list. When they did that, they had to take them off the menu at the Volcano House Lodge within the national park. Nene was served with ohelo berry dressing, the favorite food of the nene. It was truly sacrilege, all the way down to 33 birds left, brought back to flourishing numbers thanks to the William Shipman properties in Kea'au, beachfront property. 255 mated pair of nene geese in the national park today. Nene geese are now being seen on other islands of Oahu, Maui, Kauai, and nesting on those islands. It's been 100 years since this has happened. And so we're getting some of these things back, but only with proper management can we absolutely save some of these things, because we're still losing things. The invasive species, the gingers that were brought here. Oh, there's such a beautiful plant, but the seeds of the yellow ginger is spread throughout the national park, and it's so ingrained they can't get rid of it. It's not possible. Community groups, school groups come in, they help them whack it down, dig some of it out. The broad leaf of the ginger keeps the rain from hitting the forest floor. What is an SEA, secured ecological area, but the national park, some of the only sections of the Hawaiian native forest in Hawaii. Little isolated pockets within the national park, and the invasive species are encroaching. The newest plant, you might see it on your way over to the Hilo side, the red plant growing all along in the ditches. It's called a knot plant, K-N-O-T, and it also grows on the higher elevations of Mount Fuji in Japan. And somehow during the 2011 tsunami, this plant migrated over here to Hawaii and is so ingrained in the national park up on Saddle Road, there's no way of getting rid of it. So prolific is it, it grows way out in the lava fields, the a'a. And here's this red flowering plant growing anywhere it lands. And so it's a new thing, and we don't know all the ramifications of it. And it's baffling how it could have migrated here during a tsunami event from a high elevation of Mount Fuji to a high elevation here in Hawaii. But here we have it, and now it's something else we're dealing with, the ROD, rapid ohia death. Oh my God, this is devastating. Ohia is so instrumental in Hawaiian culture, with the flowers and the plants being noted in many legends of ancient history, the ohia. And now the plant is infected for 2 years before it shows any signs or symptoms of the ROD, rapid ohia death. Then it dies in as little as 5 to 6 months. It's gone. But it's already infected by the time it shows. There's no saving it. Once it starts to wilt, it wilts and dies in 6 months. So hundreds of year-old ohia tree forests are dying off. And this ohia, rapid ohia death is moving around the island, sections of near the national park. And so no moving of any ohia products anywhere. It's in the wood itself. The borer beetle actually makes sawdust. The sawdust gets caught in the wind and it spreads the disease. So any movement, nothing can be moved. From island to island, it's forbidden, because it's only on this island. If it ends up on the other islands, well, the ohia here at the national park is an endemic variety, even from the other islands. It has special adaptations so that it can thrive and survive in the Ka'u Desert, where nothing else can. It's fascinating. On the back of the leaf is a breathing apparatus. And if you tip the branch of the ohia up, you'll see it. The new growth is bright white and clean. The old growth is nasty, dirty. It has a breathing apparatus that filters its own air. And so during dramatic volcanic eruptions, scientists say ohia can hold its breath for 2 weeks and hold its breath until the eruption is over, so it can thrive and survive in areas where nothing can. Special endemic for ohia on the Kilauea volcano, different from the ohia on Oahu, different from the ohia elsewhere. And so this is a resource that is scary to think about losing. And so it can actually, the ohia is fascinating. It has its roots up on the top of the tree, and it actually has another feature. It can control its genetic structure. Ohia can grow in 3 different modes depending upon the forest it finds itself in. It falls down on a lava flow because the roots are on top. It lands on top. The root, a little piece of that, gets caught up in a cracker glass. You can't kill ohia. And so the story of ohia. Oh, I need to do that story. Yeah. Have you guys ever heard the story of ohia and lehua? A beautiful story of Hawaiian forbidden love. And it's a wonderful tale, and it's one of the oldest stories and legends in the Hawaiian culture. I found it fascinating, and I've heard it a few different ways. I've kind of put it together to make it my own story. And so it'd really be an honor for me to share the ohia story with you. Alrighty, here we go. Ohia was not always a tree. Ohia was one time a Kane warrior of the village of Hilo. He was so handsome. Ohia was so handsome that when he walked down the street, the women would swoon. They go, did you see that guy? He was kind of like this guy. He's so handsome. Well, he fell in love with lehua, a beautiful commoner class. It was a forbidden love, and the commoners were forbidden to even associate with the elite. And so having a love relationship was truly forbidden. But these 2 young lovers, they knew it was forbidden, and they would sneak away, and they would meet in secrecy. Ohia would sneak away first and play the no'onau ihu, Hawaiian bamboo nose flute, played with the breath of the nose, said they have the highest mana because the nose can tell no lie. And so the music played through the no'onau ihu was said to catch any woman's attention. Well, Ohia is up on the Kilauea volcano playing the no'onau ihu, and who was to hear the music? It was Madame Pele herself. Madame Pele, her transfixed by the sound of Ohia's music, transformed herself into the most beautiful woman and approached to meet the maker of the music. The conversation that ensued, it was evident she was enamored as she was offering herself in a love relationship to Ohia. But Ohia made it plain to Madame Pele that the music was not for her. The woman was scorned. Oh, angry did she get. She looked at Ohia and she wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh, as handsome as you are, you're forever to be an ugly old tree." The magic was done. Ohia was transformed into that dark, scraggly bark, small, tiny, round leaves with spots and bumps and knots all over them. It's not a pretty tree at all. But who comes looking for Ohia? It was Lehua. Lehua is looking through the forest. Ohia! Ohia! Nowhere to be found. Lehua is looking everywhere. The locals say, Lehua, Madame Pele has changed Ohia into a tree. And there's nothing you can do. Oh, Lehua's heart is broken. She's devastated. She's crying as her heart sinks deep into her chest. And she's crying, and the locals say, Lehua, Madame Pele's too strong, but you're so young and beautiful. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Can you go back to Hilo, find yourself another young Kane, and be happy? Oh, but Lehua's not having any of it, man. She's crying all the way back to Hilo. She found a kahuna, and she says, kahuna, Madame Pele has changed my ohia into a tree. Goes, Lehua, I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can do. Madame Pele's magic is too strong. With these words, Lehua's heart sinks deeper into despair as she cries, and I don't care what he looks like. He'll always be my ohia to me. And the kahuna says, Lehua, I'm so sorry, I cannot change him back. But I could take you, Lehua, transform you into a beautiful crimson flower. I could carry you up to the volcano and place you upon the ohia trees. Well, with these words, Lehua's heart begins to swell. Filling with delight, she cries out, yes, kahuna, yes, do this magic so that ohia and I can be together forever. So the kahuna did the magic. He transformed Lehua into a beautiful crimson flower, carried her up to the Kilauea volcano, and placed her upon the ohia tree, forever uniting the 2 young lovers, Ohia and Lehua. Oh, but Madame Pele heard of the magic of the kahuna. Madame Pele heard of this thwarting of her magic. She got so angry. Fire flew from her eyes as she stomped the ground. A wave of lava erupted from the mountain. Madame Pele tried to kill all the ohia trees. It was to no avail. Up in the top of the ohia tree is that nest-looking ball of roots, a root ball up in the top of the tree, so when the lava flows around the tree, it starts to get hard even before the tree burns down. The tree falls on top of the lava flow, and a little piece of that root ball gets into a crack or crevasse. It becomes the first tree that starts to grow on the lava flow. And so then, no matter how hard Madame Pele tried, she couldn't kill all the ohia trees. And so they say that if you pick that flower from the ohia tree, then you would be the one to cause the skies to cry, because you would be separating the two young lovers, Ohia and Lehua. There you go, my friends. Forbidden love. It's a great thing, isn't it? It's always challenging the hearts. So many stories of Madame Pele challenging the hearts of the people prior to lava flows. And so you can put it to coincidence if you want, but there are protocols getting fulfilled, and the history of protocols being fulfilled and miraculous things happening. You keep hearing of these things. And it's just amazing. The 1801 flow, we all see the lava tube as we go out north here. That's the 1801 flow, and the lava flow came down in 1801, started in the middle of King Kamehameha's Ulu Orchard. As that lava flow came down as a lava river, he created that lava tube, created new land on the Kona coast, and in 1801, King Kamehameha came to the lava flow. And so he, with the lava flow erupting in the middle of his Ulu Orchard, he took it as a personal attack by the volcano goddess. There must have been something he had done wrong. So he approached the lava flow and he offered his oli, his chant, his sacrifice of fruits and vegetables and pork. And then he offered personal sacrifice of hair clippings and fingernails. Personal DNA added to the lava flow, and that next day the lava stopped flowing. So the story says. Protocols fulfilled, the volcano goddess was appeased. So many times these stories are around, and I hear so many different things as the representations of Madame Pele challenging the hearts of the people, sometimes as an old haggard woman, all gnarly and bent over with a big mole on her chin, wrinkled and crinkled in a single tooth. I've seen it. I've seen it. And it's amazing when you hear the stories of the beautiful woman, all dressed in a red dress, picked up on a rainy night on the side of the volcano. Stories that uncles have told me of gifts of Madame Pele, gold nuggets that disappear in their hand if they opened them because they weren't supposed to open it till they got home. Just, you gotta follow protocols. You gotta do it right, or don't do it all. Being Pono is part of the culture. So anytime the stories, there's deeper meanings within the stories. And it's really kind of cool. The story of Ka'upulehu, the story of roasting bread for the 1801 flow from Hawaiian. And the Four Seasons Resort, you'll see the sign right there as you go by the Four Seasons. It says Ka'upulehu. Well, this is a story of a beautiful story and a visitation of Madame Pele before the 1801 flow. The visitation came to the village that was where the Four Seasons was and is today. As the visitation came, she was an old, haggard woman, all bent over, gnarly, wrinkled and crinkled with that single tooth and a big mole on her chin. As she approached the village during a time of famine, she says, "I'm hungry. I need something to eat." People in the village said, "No, go away. This is a time of famine. We have nothing for you." "Oh, please, some tails or entrails. I need something to eat." And the village again said, "No, go away." So she did. And as she was leaving the town, she came upon two young girls that were roasting the ulu, the Hawaiian breadfruit, growing from the top of the tree. It looks like a bowling ball, a big, giant, green, starchy breadfruit, Hawaiian staple. They would slice the breadfruit and roast it. It would become sticky like a potato. And so these two young girls are roasting the ulu. And I see an old auntie walking by. And the one little girl says, "Oh, old auntie, she looks hungry. We have nothing to share. Just don't even look at her. Maybe she'll walk on by." The other little girl looks up and sees the auntie. "Oh, auntie, you do look hungry. Come over here. Sit down and I'll share my piece of ulu with you." And so the old auntie come to sit down with the two girls. And as she sat down, the little girl thought she saw a little glimmer or spark in her eye, but she made no notice of it. She just sat down and having conversation with the old auntie as the ulu was roasting. The ulu was getting hot and really getting good. The little girl takes her piece of ulu and cuts it in half and hands half of it to the old auntie. And the old auntie took the ulu and put it in her mouth and went just gobbled it up. The little girl was astonished. Nobody could eat ulu that fast. It would burn their mouth. Oh, the little girl turned to her friend and come back, and the old auntie says, "Oh, thank you for being so kind. And I really appreciate that. When you get home tonight, you tell your mama to put a piece of copper cloth on a wooden post on the corners of the property. She'll know exactly what to do. Well, the little girl was befuddled. She didn't know what was going on. She turns to her friend again. When she turns back, the old auntie had disappeared. She was gone in a vanish. Well, the little girl, astonished, she went running home, and she started to tell her mom about the story of the old auntie who come to visit the village. And how when she sat down, she could see a little glimmer, spark in her eye. And when she fed the ulu, how she gobbled it up so fast that nobody could eat the ulu. And it was just incredible. And then when her little girl told her mama about putting the copper cloth on the post on the corner of the property, her mother knew in an instant that it was Madame Pele who had come to visit. And she followed directions explicitly. She put the copper cloth on wooden posts on all the corners of the property just because she knew. And they waited. One day went by and nothing happened, and then another day went by and again nothing happened. But on the third day, erupting out of the middle of King Kamehameha's ulu orchard, the Ka'upulehu flow, it came right down towards the Four Seasons, and right there at the little girl's property where the copper cloth was placed on the post, it made a split. And to the right, the village that didn't share with the old auntie, and to the left, the little girl whose ohana hadn't trained her to be kind to old aunties. They were destroyed. But right in the middle, the story of Ka'upulehu, the little girl, and the story of the sharing of the roasting breadfruit. And so that's the story of Ka'upulehu. I hope you enjoyed. Well, get back into endemic varieties of stuff a little bit, just because we have such a plight with the little palila bird. The little palila bird is a little green bird that sole food source is the mamani tree on the slopes of Mauna Kea. Now the mamani trees, the babies are being eaten by the mouflon sheep. And so mamani is the sole food source for the little palila bird. Mamani is an endemic tree, but palila bird an endemic bird. One cannot live without the other. So now being put on the endangered species list, the DLNR, Department of Land Management Resources, fencing in a big section of Mauna Kea, reforesting with the mamani. And also with the reforesting of mamani, they reforest with the sandalwood. As to save the palila bird, the mamani is essential, but as the sandalwood, it used to be called the Sandalwood Isles here. There was a lot of sandalwood. The sandalwood was all over the islands, and there was so much sandalwood on the islands that when King Kamehameha already had fulfilled 2 of the 3 prophecies to become the elite Yamoku by the time he was 19 on board the ship Resolution with Captain Cook. In 1778, he was 19 years old, and he'd already fulfilled 2 of the prophecies to be elite Yamoku, or leader of all the lands. He had a different mindset. All the other chiefs, with the first seeing of the guns, wanted to know how to go bang. Now, King Kamehameha had a different mindset. How was he going to be able to procure the guns? Getting the guns was evident. He needed to get the guns of the white man in order to become the elite Yamoku, or leader of all the lands. And what he found was the sandalwood was very valuable. And even during King Kamehameha's time, a 6-foot stick of sandalwood said to be worth $60. It's the most expensive volatile oil, and it's the most expensive wood in the world today. And it's very rare on the island. It's indigenous, found here naturally, and also in India and China and elsewhere around the world, used in spiritual practices for 1,000 years prior to Captain Cook by all philosophies in the world. Christians use the sandalwood for anointing of oils along with frankincense and myrrh. Indian philosophy put the sandalwood on their forehead and on their throat, awakening spiritual consciousness in the pineal gland. Hawaiian culture used the sandalwood also as oil for the pineal and the throat. And so sandalwood was so valuable, even during Captain Cook's time, that 1 stick was worth $60. $1 million worth of sandalwood would leave the island for $1,000 worth of nails, because the Hawaiians had nothing made of metal. An unequitable trade, but this is what King Kamehameha was willing to do in order to procure the armaments. But nobody would sell the natives guns. So he got 2 British defectors to become his gun buyers, and they bought the guns, trading the sandalwood. What used to be known as the Sandalwood Isle is very rare today. The natives were used like slaves in procuring the sandalwood off the mountains, carrying the giant bundles of sandalwood on their backs. Their backs were calloused, gouged, and scored. As the terrain out here, we have roads. They didn't. They're carrying these bundles down off the mountain on their backs, and if they saw a baby sandalwood tree, they would pick it and say, "My child will never have to do this." That's why there's very little sandalwood left. So the reforestation of sandalwood as an indigenous species is essential also on the island. There are 2 farms on the island that are producing the sandalwood seedlings. Anytime anybody plants koa wood, ohia trees, mamani trees, endemic varieties or native plants, please plant sandalwood also. Sandalwood has to have a symbiotic relationship. It cannot grow by itself. If you plant a sandalwood tree out in the field by itself, it'll die. It has to have a host. The host, the symbiotic relationship, mamani, ohia, koa wood. The root system gets underneath the sandalwood. You plant the sandalwood on top of that. And that nitrogen produced by the root system of the host is what the sandalwood needs to survive. And so it's a very difficult thing to propagate. It has to be planted in this relationship. And so reforesting to save the palila bird, also including the sandalwood to reforest with sandalwood. Now there is a specimen of sandalwood on today's market. Sandalwood is the most expensive wood. 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds, a log. 4 inches around, 2 feet long, is worth $2,000 on today's market. Seriously, yeah. 1 or 2 millimeters vial of pure sandalwood oil is $45. It's the most expensive oil on the market. I share sandalwood oil when I do the story about the sandalwood at the national park, because I get to show a specimen of sandalwood so rare on the island, truly protected in the national park. It's illegal to break a stick. You can't harvest deadwood underneath it. Outside of the park, you can harvest deadwood underneath the sandalwood tree, but it's illegal to harvest anything green on the whole island. That's how it's restricted. And so most people don't recognize it because it's so rare. But I found a specimen of sandalwood over at the national park that's worth millions. It's huge. Sandalwood's normally a small bush, a slow-growing plant that's a bush underneath the host. This one here is about 15 feet tall and logs on it this big around. The most treasured calabashes and boxes of the world are made of sandalwood wood. The sawdust is so valuable, they make incense out of it. Nothing goes to waste. And so being able to share the sandalwood story and then showing the sandalwood, I share the oils on tour, and I anoint people with oil. And it's an amazing connection that I get with people when I share the Hawaiian culture, the way the Hawaiians would have perpetuated their culture. So I found myself in a really unique position teaching Hawaiians about their own culture, and some of the threads of knowledge that have come up through that I've been able to glean it seems to be, I've been told I need to bring it to a bigger audience, and so this today is my endeavor to do that. And so it's a lot of fun for me, for sure. The Hawaiian, I learned about Aloha Aina, and it's really an interesting concept, as the kino is the body of the government and the structure, the way the Hawaiians actually led their lives. And it's really kind of fascinating because the petroglyph parks all around the island are petroglyphs. Well, it's actually remnants of a Hawaiian language that predated King Ka'ao in 1200. And remnants and some of the knowledge is coming up through the Kapuna groups of some of the meaning of some of these petroglyphs. Now, the petroglyphs have whole meanings, kind of like hieroglyphics of Egypt. And so it was a written language, but it was now the knowledge of those petroglyphs has pretty much been lost. But some of that's coming up, and it was really fascinating to find out about the kino, and it looks just like a human body. As the head of the kino is the Aina, the king that represents the Aina the best, the people can flourish. So the kino is the body of the petroglyph of a body, with a right arm, a right leg, and a left leg, and a left arm, and as a head is being the king, representing the Aina. The kahunas of old were the keepers of the knowledge, the right arm of the kino. As every aspect of Hawaiian culture had a kahuna in charge of that aspect. The navigation kahunas, the canoe building kahunas, the fishing kahunas, the spiritual kahunas, every aspect of life, medical kahunas. I've heard stories of 20 different fields of medical kahunas participating in individual specialized care for a vast flourishing society. They had to have kahunas for every aspect. And they were surviving with this knowledge of the kino. As the kahunas, the knowledge was the right arm, essential in our bodies working too. Now the left arm of the kino represented the ali'i. The ali'i were the administrators. And so when the kahuna of fishing says, we're having a problem with this species of fish, they would tell the ali'i. The ali'i would tell the king. The king would put the kapu on that species of fish. Land management was dealt with in their system through the kahunas and the ali'i. But the workers of the kino were the farmers and the fishermen, and that's the right leg of the kino. The body can't stand without a good support system, and everybody has to eat. We depend on our workers, and in that, the right leg. The left leg of the kino was the warriors and the keepers of the peace. And so everybody has to feel safe at night. And so the body of government with the structure of the Kino had a place for everybody. Everybody fit within the structure. There is nobody that didn't fit within the structure. You can find your joy within the structure of their body of government. Either you were a teacher, you were a li'i, you were a farmer, or you were a warrior. But you could find your joy. And there was no homelessness. And there was nobody left without. Everybody could follow their hearts and follow their joy. And as long as the Aina was being serviced by every finger and toe of the Kino, and the king represented the Aina, they flourished under this structure to grow to a 2 million population on this island, or 400,000. Somewhere in between, with this structure, they had everything they needed. And something we could learn from that. Something we could truly learn from that. As our political structures today divide the people. If the right leg needs a scratch, nobody's going to scratch it, the black against the white. If the left leg needs help, well, nobody's going to scratch that either in our society because of the Muslims against the Christians. It's all these divisions that keep our body of government from working. We have to work together under one form for the Aina at the top, not a person. And it doesn't matter who's representing the Aina has to flourish. And if the Aina flourishes, then all the fingers of the toes get exactly what they need. And so in that, everybody is held by status or rank. And so as you gain knowledge, you rise up in your rank. But your base reality is that you belong to the Kino. And everybody has a home. And nobody's left on the streets homeless. So it's an interesting concept, just something I think political systems today could utilize. I'm not supposed to get political on tour, but I can't help myself. They tell me not to get too spiritual either, but that too is part of the Hawaiian culture. As the connections of all of humanity are recognized within the Hawaiian philosophies. I can go a little bit into that, I suppose. It's really interesting when the Hawaiians' belief is of the aka, the body's aura. The aka is the body's aura. And when the belief is you look somebody in the eye or you touch them, you pull off a thin filament of this body's aura called plasma. And we're all connected to everybody we've ever touched, ever looked in directly in the eyes, and through this aka spirit. Now the connections of everybody you know are connected to everybody they know are connected to everybody they know becomes a universal grid of collective consciousness, or u'aka, in the Hawaiian culture. When Captain Cook arrived on the island, he wrote in his journals how profound it was that like the natives knew he was coming. How is this possible? There could be thousands of boats in the water, or hundreds even. I've maybe exaggerated a little. But there were millions of people. There could have been thousands. It's amazing. And they were all waiting for Captain Cook. How is this possible? Led by prophecy, the Hawaiian culture had the kahunas that prophesied prior to the birth of Kamehameha, prophesied the arrival to the Hawaiian Islands and a migration from the 12 tribes of Israel. They took 1,000 years. Following a guiding light, a star, Hokulea, the zenith star over the Hawaiian Islands. But it only comes over here, it's every 6 months, and it only comes over here as the time goes by. So you had to find the elliptic line of the Hokulea star and then follow that around the planet until you found the islands. But they were prophesied to find this place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and prior to anybody even knowing it was here, by kahunas of old. And stories of the prophecies truly fascinated me. It's like prophecy of the old Bible. You know, and it's like, how in the world these prophecies being fulfilled, and then King Kamehameha went on to become the Ali'iamoku. These are great spiritual connections. That's how it's possible. It's the same energy that a mother knows that her child's been injured thousands of miles away. At the time of the accident, she feels it intuitively inside. She knows something happened to her child. How is this possible? Because it comes through that spiritual connection of u'aka. And a mother is really connected close and tight with their child. And kahunas of old were actually communicating through these connections. They had such a working relationship with the spiritual connections of the universal collective consciousness that they were actually communicating from one village to another village to another village about the arrival of Captain Cook, and prophesied to come during the makihiki time, the time of festival, and the time of 3 months celebration in the fall. And the white banner, being the kapa cloth on a post, is the symbol for the makihiki. The red color is the most sacred color for the Hawaiian culture. The kahunas of old wouldn't wear the red unless they were in confines of their own heiau. So sacred was the color red. And then here comes Captain Cook underneath the white sail, wearing the red jacket. Hello, no wonder they mistook him for the god Lono. The natives all bowed down to Captain Cook, and he let them believe that, okay, You know, if they're going to bow down, then let's continue on with this. So he kind of let it go on for a while. And so he reprovisioned his ship. The natives were getting in some guns, and now the trade was happening with the provisions for guns, the first interactions. And then the natives, the scurvy sailors, couldn't keep their hands off the women. They weren't wearing any clothes. And so the disease went rampant from that first interaction. Even Captain Cook was said to have his way with some of the native women. And so it was everywhere and prominent throughout the whole interaction. And so it's just devastated the culture. I got a little off topic there. I was talking about the spiritual connections, wasn't I? It's all good though. So these connections are so real that the second prophecy of King Kamehameha was the lifting of the Naha stone, the lifting of a 5,000-pound obelisk stone. And he did it at the age of 14, the story says, as mana of his ancestors descended upon him in a dream through the Uaka. As he approached the stone, everybody took 2 steps back as the whole village of Hilo was behind the king leading the procession. He arrived at the Naha stone, which sits in front of the public library over there in Hilo. And he bent over to pick the stone, and more mana was said to arrive onto the king, and everybody took 2 more steps back. At the age of 14, he lifted this estimated 5,000-pound stone, the weight of 2 cars, flipping it over, completing the second of the 3 prophecies of Kamehameha to become the elite Yamoku, or leader of all the lands. And so the spiritual connections of Uwaka, where the power mana of our ancestors can descend to us through the time of need. The same power that a grandmother feels at the time of need during an accident. She can pick up a car. We've heard of that. It's the same stuff. It's just that now the Hawaiian culture had working relationships through these energies, and it's just really been wild for me to just explore it and understand it and be able to present it, because I had to make it make sense to me before I could make it make sense to people on tour. And so all these things all webbed together to create quite an extraordinary day for me. I really love doing what I'm doing. So some of the oldest stories and legends, I could get into some a little more. You guys, the stories of Maui are some of the oldest stories. And the stories Maui Island is named after the Hawaiian Superman of Maui. And so prolific are these stories within the Hawaiian culture. All the Polynesian islands share stories of Maui. The island of New Zealand was said to be built and shaped by Maui himself in a fit of rage, with his mighty war club beating the lands, forming the whole mountain ranges of New Zealand and shaping the Maoris. Have these stories of Maui. Maoris in New Zealand have an island also called Maui. So these are the oldest stories and legends, and they start right here in Hilo. Petroglyphs up above the Rainbow Falls depicting the story of Maui and the Kuna Mo'o. The stories of Maui's mother, who lives in the cave up underneath Rainbow Falls, Hina, the moon goddess. And so prolific are these stories of Maui, and they're fascinating and sharing. There's so many tales. I could go on and on. Maui, the fisher of islands. Maui had a magic fish hook, and he's trolling along out in the ocean, and he snags the bottom of the ocean and pulls up the whole chain of islands. The stories of Maui doing magical things and fits of unbelievable strength. How is this possible? One of the stories of Maui is that Maui's mother, Hina, was out swimming in the ocean collecting the limu, the seaweed, for dinner. She was said to brush up against the loincloth and become pregnant. Nobody knew who Maui's father was. That made the uncles and the brothers really suspicious and always kind of standoffish, made Maui very competitive in nature, but his kind, loving heart for his mother Hina was known throughout all of Polynesia. And it's just a fascinating thing, because the stories of the Menehune on the island, the little people, okay, 2 inches tall to 2 feet tall, little hairy humanoid creatures that wore no clothes. Prior to Hawaiians' arrival to the island, the Menehune were said to be used like slaves. Groups of Menehune were captured by the Hawaiian culture and sent building projects. Now the Menehune up in the mountains that were still hiding would descend upon the areas where the Menehunes that were captured and completed those building projects overnight miraculously. The Menehune Highway, the Menehune Ditch, and the ponds over at Queen Liliuokalani Gardens, said to be engineering feats of the Menehune, adjusted the tides up and down, but the level in the ponds at the gardens stays right there at the perfect level. Engineering said to be designed by the Menehune. And so maybe there was a little Menehune in that loincloth. And maybe Maui's a half Menehune could account for some of his magical powers. Just a thought. It's kind of funny though. So Maui was seeing his mother working one day as she was making kapa cloth. an arduous task of beating the white inner bark of the mulberry tree against the pikake log, with beating the white inner bark strips of the mulberry on top of more strips, adding water, adding more beating, more strips, more beating on the pikake log because it was a pure white wood. It's an endemic variety of holly that grows here without any spikes on its leaves because there was no predators to eat the holly. The pikake log grew tall and big. White wood would not stain the kapa, so the preferred wood for the Hawaiian kapa building making. All day long, Mother Hina's beating these strips of bark together, making a whole sheet of cloth, and now she was going to hang the cloth up on the line to dry just as the sun started to set down and splash into the ocean and complete its cycle for another day. Oh, now the kapa cloth might mold or mildew. It wouldn't dry at all. Maui, seeing his mother's dilemma, thought he might be able to help. He noticed that the sun was setting through the great chasm on the Haleakala Mountain over there on Maui Island today. And so with 3 strokes of his canoe paddle, he said to arrive on Maui Island, and bouncing up the slopes of Haleakala, he yelled up at the sun, "Hey, Mr. Sun, you need to slow yourself down so that my mama's kapa cloth dry." The sun looked down at Maui and gave out a chuckle. "Silly human, you got no power over me," and continued right on down to splash into the ocean, completing another day. Made Maui a little irritated, to say the least. He seeked out the kapuna groups, the older people with wisdom, and they told him of a kahuna, a keeper of knowledge, that had a way to snare the sun. And so Maui seeked out this kahuna, and he learned a technique for tying this fancy snare. He tied this great snare, and he carried it up to the great chasm on the Haleakala Mountain and stretched it across the great chasm. The next day, the sun rose high in the sky, and reaching its pinnacle, it started to make its descent. And coming down towards the ocean, it came down lower and lower. His sunbeams started to touch onto Maui's snare, not recognizing it at all. At first, the sun just kept right on coming down. Now his sunbeams were getting knotted up and tangled. More and more the sun came down, the more knotted up and tangled they became, to where at the point the sun was held fast in the sky. And no matter how hard he was pushing to get down to the ocean, he bounced right back up in the sky. Well, that's when Maui was said to jump back up on the Haleakala, and he yelled up at the sun again, "Hey there, see there, Mr. Sun? I do have some power over you, and today you're going to have to make a deal with me." And they say that is the day the deal was done. Maui is going to let the sun go around the world all winter long just as fast as he wants. But in the summer, he's going to have to slow down, let his mama's kapa cloth dry, let the farmers get their fields planted and sowed. So Maui took the snare down, but left it there on that great chasm. So every day when the sun comes around, he'll see that snare, and he'll never forget that day that Maui snared the sun. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, there's so many stories of Maui. It's fascinating. Maui, fighting this 12-eyed bat is an amazing story. I was like, wow. And some of these fanciful stories of Maui, the gatherer of fire, bringing fire to the people. Now, it was said that the crows were the keepers of the fire. And it's like, wow, the crows? Okay, but this is the story, so here we go. Maui said that the crows were the keepers of the fire, and Maui had to trick the crows to figure out how they were doing it. They say that Maui built a dummy, and he put it in his canoe and pushed it out in the ocean, and then made it look like he was fishing. But really, Maui is hiding in the thicket back behind the crows. And the crows, seeing the dummy out in the ocean, took it from Maui being out there fishing. They proceeded to build a fire, and Maui learned the secret and brought the secret to the people. So Maui was the bringer of fire to the people. It's too cool, yeah. So many stories, and it makes sense when you kind of put it together, I suppose. But crows, it's interesting. Yeah. But anyway, we're going to finish the Maui stories with the Maui versus the Kuna mo'o. So many stories of the Kuna mo'os. And what is a mo'o? As the Hawaiian legends and talk about the mo'o, there's a fascinating creatures, as there were giant lizard creatures. Some of the stories of mo'os were winged lizard creatures. They had to be dragon stories. As other cultures in the world have stories of dragons, and so did the Hawaiian culture, this is an amazing one of those dragon stories. As Maui is the oldest petroglyphs on the island depicting the moon goddess, and the story of Kuna mo'o up above Rainbow Falls, Hina lived in the cave up underneath Rainbow Falls, was constantly being tormented by the Kuna mo'o. Sticks and stones and debris thrown into the river, coming over Rainbow Falls and constantly tormenting Hina. But Hina never feared the Kuna mo'o all that much. She always knew that Maui is going to be close at hand to save her. So one day it was raining a torrent up on top of Mauna Kea. As the water level comes down the mountain as a direct runoff, there is no reservoir. So if it's raining a bunch on the mountain, it's a wash coming down the river, and it can be a torrent. Well, the Kuna Mo'o, as this rain was torrenting down the mountain through the Wailuku River, coming down over Rainbow Falls, Kuna Mo'o was able to dislodge a giant boulder off the side of the cliff. This boulder crashed into the riverbed. When it hit the riverbed, sparks and lightnings flashed through the water as this weight of this giant boulder bounced down the riverbank over the falls at Rainbow Falls and plugged the mouth of the Wailuku River. The water started to rise into the cave up underneath Rainbow Falls. Maui's mother Hina was sleeping at the time of as the rock plugged in, and so it's during the storm. There was so much rain. So she's sleeping on the sleeping loft, the water rising up in there, just about to get to the sleeping loft when she awoke suddenly, yelled out a scream for Maui to come and save her. It was actually a chant that went out on the wind. "Oh Maui, the fisher of islands. Oh Maui, the slower of the sun. Come quickly, it is Hina calling. Come quickly, bring your fast canoe and bring your mighty war club and save me from the Kuna Mo'o." The chant went out on the wind. Maui was said to hear the chant as if in a dream, and he knew in an instant that his mother, Hina, was in danger. With 3 strokes of his canoe paddle said to hit the shore of the Wailuku River so hard his canoe turned to stone. It sits there to this day, says Canoe Island, right there by the Singing Bridge on the Wailuku River. And now bouncing up the dry riverbank, Maui recognized right away that something was wrong. He could see it was raining up above, but nothing coming down the river. He approached the giant boulder with his mighty war club. He cracked that boulder, and it broke into little shards, and the water started to recede out from the cave at Rainbow Falls. Approaching the cave at Rainbow Falls, the Kuna Mo'o was hilt into the cave, trying to get Mother Hina. Maui grabbed the Kuna Mo'o by the tail and flinging him against the rock wall. The rocks tumbled down over the Kuna Mo'o, but he shook him off as the battle has just begun. The battle raged above Rainbow Falls, and the crashing and the thundering changed the shape of the river. What used to be straight and narrow was now cracked, and big pots were formed. The Kuna Mo'o slid into one of the big cracks. Maui hit the side of that crack so violently the Kuna Mo'o was shaken and rattled and come quickly up out of that crack, down into one of the holes to hide from Maui. But Maui could see him down there in the bottom. He took his spear and slung it down at the Kuna Mo'o. He was young and agile and slinked out of the way of the spear, coming up out of one hole and down into another one. The Kuna Mo'o couldn't be seen. Maui, looking for the Kuna Mo'o, thought maybe he called for Madame Pele to help. Rocks and lava come flying down the mountain. The rocks and lava were thrown into the hole at the Kuna Mo'o. Burned and scorched, but not yet defeated, he come quickly out of that hole as the battle raged above Rainbow Falls. Exchanging mighty blows, Maui got the upper hand with Kuna Mo'o with his war club upside of the head. Over the Rainbow Falls, he fell to his demise, changing to stone. And there he'd be bombarded with all the sticks and debris and everything for eternity, just like he tormented Hina prior to the battle. It's the story of a great battle at Rainbow Falls, the story of Maui versus the Kuna Mo'o. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. You like that? That was good? Awesome. I love you too. It's awesome. I'm so glad you're here.
Tell me one more.
I can tell you another one. You want to hear another one?
Tell me another one.
Oh, tell her another one. Yes, brother.
Isn't there a movie coming out?
I think there is. I saw it. Yeah. I saw the advertisement for it. The Maui, the Hawaiian Superman. I'm excited to see some more stories because there are so many Maui stories. I just got a new book too, and they talk about deeper meaning within the stories. And it's really kind of interesting because all the things the Hawaiians tell, or all these stories, have a reason for being told. As the dragons in our lives keep finding places to hide, we have to dig them out and find the cracks and the crevasses and battle our own personal dragons until we defeat them and leave the remnants of our dragons at the foot of our own waterfall so we can go on in our own joy in life. So look for the deeper meanings, my friends, because they're all there. Sometimes you don't see it right away.
You have to bring those old traditions back.
I love that. Absolutely. The way they would teach their children. There's a reason for the telling of the story. Everybody likes a few ghost stories, though. How about a ghost story for today? I was over there at the volcano, and I had a school group of 47 students, and the teachers, Kapuna, Kumu. The Kumu actually had arranged for Kapuna groups to come up from Ka'u district and tell stories to the children. While I was up there, the Kapunas are telling the stories. Some of the stories I told, different versions of whatever. You have to make it your own to make it right, you know. And so one of the tutus pulled me to the side, Tutu Vahine, as grandmother. She pulled me to the side and said, "Hey, Uncle Jim, I got this story to tell you that's not written down in any of the books." Intrigued I became. She started telling me the story of the evil kahuna of Ka'u. I had to do some research. I had to make it my own. I had to find out what it was all about. Finding out it's about the Hawaiian ancient practice of a death prayer chant. Ghost spirits. The Uipili ghost spirits are a certain variety of ghosts that are found here on the island. As wandering ghost spirits, unaware of their own demise, they have no thinking apparatus. And so they were easily led by the hypnotic suggestion of kahunas of old. So the Uipilis could be used by the good kahunas to do good things. They could send messages. They could even carry packages, I'm told. But the evil kahuna of Ka'u used the Uipili in what was called a Hawaiian death prayer chant. The princess, the king of Ka'u, had done something to the evil kahuna and had a spot of guilt in her heart. With this spot of guilt in her heart, it went a place for the Uipili sent by the evil kahuna to fester. The evil kahuna sending the Uipili in a Hawaiian death prayer chant to the princess of the king. Now the mana being absorbed in the princess, first her feet were said to go numb. The numbness rising up her legs to her knees, she became bedridden. As the numbness rose into her hips and into her thighs, the king of Ka'u was worried for his princess daughter. If the numbness was to reach her heart, it would certainly mean the death of the princess. So he called for his kahunas to administer to the princess. Find out what's wrong with them. What's wrong with her, they asked. The kahunas of the king found the Uipili hiding within the heart of the princess, had a conversation with the Uipili, and informing it exactly the intent of the evil kahuna. And that when now the knowledge of the Uipili knowing what was being used for his presence, he reversed the spell of the evil kahuna, reversing it right back onto the evil kahuna. The Uipili descended upon the heart of the evil kahuna. He went running across the Ka'u desert where he was said to be entombed that day, where there's a rock outcropping in the Ka'u desert. It's one outreaching arm. It's the evil kahuna of Ka'u, and the whole story of the Hawaiian death prayer chant. I hope you enjoyed. I didn't scare you, did I? As long as you don't have any guilt in your heart, you have nothing to fear from the Hawaiian ghosts. So keep your hearts clean. It's all good then. Oh my gosh, what a great time I'm having. It's a lot of fun. Let's see, where should I go from here? Oh, I got 20 minutes. The story of the geology of the island is told in the Hawaiian chant, the Holo Mai Pele. It's a wonderful story, and the interactions of the Holo Mai Pele tells a lot of meaning within the chant. And it's really a fascinating story, and the geologists up at the volcano are confirming the story of the two most dramatic volcanic events that ever happened to the Hawaiian culture from the time they arrived here. Arrival estimated between the year 300 and 500. And so the story of the Holo Mai Pele, a Hawaiian chant, telling the story of King Ka'a'o coming up from 1200 and two of the most dramatic volcanic events. I could share the chant with you guys. Would you like to enjoy the chant? I've got it over here on my phone. And so if this thing is ready to go, I'm just going to hit play and it should be fine. Okay, all right. Now I got challenged by the Kumu. I was playing the chant and telling the story, and he says, "Hey Jim, next time I see you, I want to hear you do the chant along with it." So I've been practicing, and I'll go ahead and do this. Okay, so all right, so we'll get this going. There it is. Ai, holo mai pele mai kina ele kahu mai e pele holo mai pele mai kahi kina kau kawai mo o kini no e ga ua o kumule hoku pele mai I keki ono I keki a pele mai e ga ua o ele kahu mai e pele Holo mai pele mai, kahi kina kau kawai, mo o kini, no e ua o kumule. Hoku pele mai I keki, ono I keki, a pele mai, e ka ua, o ili kau mai e pele e, nai 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 pele mai laila hey ya hua nai a pele mai a kalai a lele I e no ni ke ala o ka hala o ka le hua no mo kulele a ka huila a pele mai e ka mai e pele e ai nai nai pele mai laila e ya hua nai a pele mai a kalai a lele I e no ni ke ala o ka hala o ka le hua no mo kulele a ka huila a pele mai e ka mai e pele e kunana le ka pulena a e mo na papa no wahi e halau no kilawea a pele mai ka iki mai ka likili koli ka uolo ko ka ua pakaho hai hai lawa ke ele ka mai e pele e kunana le ka pulena a e mo na papa no wahi e halau no kilawea ha pele mai ka likili koli ka uolo ko ka ua pakaho hai hai lawa ke ele ka mai e pele e kunana le ka hey no yake ka pole o pele boom boom there you go my friend. Thank you so much. Wow, it's quite a story. I call it a mini operetta. I might go a little bit over with the story, but this is going to be a good finish to the day. The story of Madame Pele's arrival to the island. The story of Madame Pele with her whole ohana in a double-hull canoe coming from the south to southeast from Tahiti. As the whole ohana, Hi'iaka was the baby sister, protected under the arm of Madame Pele during the whole journey. Led the way was the shark demigod, the Amakua of the Hawaiian culture, Mano. Mano, the shark god for the Hawaiian culture, led the way first to the northernmost island, the island of Niihau. Madame Pele was said to have a magic staff. Putting her magic staff in the island of Niihau, a big crater formed but immediately filled with water. It was not a good hot place for her and her ohana. She had to move up the chain of islands. So next she arrived on the island of Kauai. On the island of Kauai, again, she didn't find any good hot ground, but the story talks about an interlude that happens as Madame Pele found a really hot guy. Loihau, an Ali'i warrior from the island of Kauai. As this interlude took place and lasted for some time, it was a love relationship. But alas, Madame Pele had to say farewell to Loihau. She needed to continue her journey up the chain of islands to find the perfect hot ground for her and her ohana. So bidding Loihau a fond farewell, she continued the journey. Next, she arrived on Oahu. And not finding the perfect ground, she tried some of the smaller islands. There was Molokai, Lanai, Koholave, and then over to Maui Island. Not finding the perfect ground there, she started to make her way over towards the big island and landing in Hilo. Meantime, up at the crater Hale Ma'u, the home, Hale Ma'u, the six-eyed pig demigod that lived there prior to Madame Pele's arrival. He sees in a vision of Madame Pele's arrival and of her power, and he fears of Madame Pele. As she's climbing the slopes of the Kilauea volcano, the Ma'u starts to flee the crater Hale Ma'u. Madame Pele was said to see the Ma'u, and he runs across the Ka'u desert. Madame Pele giving chase to the Ma'u, he was known to be a changeling. He transformed himself into the Ma'u fern. A Ma'u fern now was touched by Madame Pele. As she ran past the fern, touching one of his fronds, changing it to that one ripe red frond on the Ma'u fern. And so if you see that one red frond, you'll know it's the Ma'u up there on the volcano. And so Madame Pele, running through the desert looking for the Ma'u, now he transforms back into the six-eyed pig demigod. The Ma'u went running towards the coast as Madame Pele sees him again, giving chase to the Ma'u all the way to the cliffs on the south side of the island. The Ma'u jumped off the cliff, transforming one last time, and now he's forever to remain the Humu Nuku Nuku Apua'a, Hawaiian state fish. Swims away, leaving the crater Hale Ma'u vacant, and that's where Madame Pele found the perfect place for her and her ohana. Moving into the crater, Hi'iaka is born from the egg and plays as a young child in the Puna forest of Hawaii. The east side of the island is the most beautiful place in the world, and Hi'iaka being raised here has become synonymous with her. She's in love with the Puna forest. She can't think of anything better than her childhood here on the Puna, over here on the volcano. So some time has gone by, and Madame Pele is thinking about this lost love. Hi'iaka's getting a little older now. She can deal with her own things. Madame Pele's thinking about Loihau. Who in my family is going to go back to Kauai and get Loiha for me? Nobody says a word. Nobody wants to get between a volcano goddess and a lover. This would be foolish. But Hi'iaka, young and naive, she stepped forward and says, Madam Pele, I will go back to Kauai and get Loiha for you if you promise to protect my Puna forest while I'm away. Madam Pele was said to think for just a moment. She comes back with her answer. Hi'iaka, you can go, but you have to be back within 40 days. And I'm told the timeline, even within the chant, is explicit. Hi'iaka only has 40 days to go back to Kauai and get Loiha. So provisions are made ready, and a companion goes along with Hi'iaka. They gather in a double-hull canoe, and they set sail back to the Kauai to get Loiha. Along the way, many arduous things were said to happen. I've heard many stories, but one in particular, a mo'o, comes from the ocean, and Hi'iaka has to take refuge along the shore. Kapuna groups, the older people with wisdom, teach Hi'iaka that she too is a goddess of life. As she's gifted a magic skirt from the kahuna, she wraps around her waist, and she learns protocols to be able to bring life back to what has been dead. And Hi'iaka now continues the journey. They all gather back in the canoe and they make their way back to Kauai. She notices right away that something is wrong. And upon her approach to Kauai, the spirit of Loiha is floating above the island. But not knowing what happened, she was said to meet with Loiha's sister, and the story of two mo'os that came up out of the ocean after Madam Pele left. Loiha, being left in despair, distraught, and his heart was saddened over the departure of Madam Pele, left him vulnerable to the attack of these two mo'os. They separated his spirit from his body, and he's kept upon the cave, in a cave upon the tall cliffs of Kauai, and protected by those two mo'os, the cave entrance itself, the calabash, the holding of the spirit, and the body of Loiha, protected by the mo'os. Hi'iaka knows exactly what she has to do. She now knows the protocols to put forth for the reanimation of Loiha. She needs a place first, a hut built of the sacred Hawaiian tea leaves with no doors and no windows, just a slit for them to enter that can be tied tight shut once they do. And now the protocols for the whole island of Kauai. Nobody's allowed to eat. Nobody's allowed to speak during the whole chanting of the ceremony. So now the protocols were being set up and ready to go. Hi'iaka goes to do battle with the two mo'os. Arriving at a 3,000-foot cliffs on Kauai. Up on top of the cliff, she sees the cave, and there's the two mo'os bouncing across the top of the cave, protecting the entrance. Hi'iaka grabs hold of the wall. She starts to ascend, hands over feet, over onto the cliffs of Kauai. The mo'os knocking sticks and debris down on her. She falls back to the ground. She can't get a good foothold. She called to Madam Pele, "Send me some help." 1,000 rats come out of nowhere, scampering up the 3,000-foot cliffs of Kauai, distracting the mo'os. Hi'iaka starts to ascend the cliffs. About halfway up, the mo'os are said to take to the air, trying to dive bomb Hi'iaka to knock her off the cliff. She pulls the magic skirt. With the touch of the skirt, poof, it goes into dust. But it reanimates. Each mo'o reanimates 3 times, and so each one has to be killed 3 times before it's to stay dead. As the battle rages on the cliffs of Kauai, Hi'iaka's holding on and battling the two mo'os, trying to knock her off the cliff. Poof into dust with her skirt. Poof into dust and poof into dust. She defeats the two mo'os, ascends to the cave upon the tall cliffs of Kauai. Entering the cave, she found the calabash, the coconut that's hanging on the wall that holds the spirit of Loiha. There on the floor is the body of Loiha, but she can't carry it down. It's too heavy. She called for Madam Pele. 1,000 rats come out of nowhere, grabbing the body of Loiha, descending all the way down the 3,000-foot cliff, all the way to the clearing where the hut had been prepared with perfect protocols of the sacred Hawaiian tea leaves for the reanimation of Loiha. There's no time left. Hi'iaka knows her time is short, but these feelings are starting to rise. Just with being with Loiha, these feelings directed towards Loiha. She's young, she's naive, she doesn't understand what they are, but they're strong and they're building inside her. But she can't focus on that. She's got to focus on the reanimation of Loiha. They entered the hut. They closed the door and it's sealed behind them, and the chanting was said to begin. The whole village is participating. Nobody's eating, nobody's speaking as the chanting starts to work. As Hi'iaka opens the calabash, the hole in the coconut is placed over the big toe on the right foot. As the chanting pushes the spirit back into the Loiha, this is taking so long. These feelings are building up inside of Hi'iaka, and they're directed towards Loiha. She's so young, but these feelings are strong. She can't focus focus on that. She's got to focus on the chanting. Any mistake and the magic would not happen. Back into the chanting she gets. Wow, pushing the spirit of Loihau back into his body. This is taking a long time, but finally she's reanimating Loihau. Loihau is coming back to life. He's going to make it. It's all done. Hi'iaka has brought Loihau back to life. They exit the hut. There's no time for a fond farewell. Now just a quick goodbye with Loihau and his sister. They gather back into the canoe. The companion, Hi'iaka, Loihau, provisions made ready to make way back for the big island. They go on their way back. They stopped at Oahu. Climbing Waikea Mountain, she looks over towards the big island. As her heart sinks deep, Madame Pele has burned the whole east side of the island. She has burned her Puna forest. All these feelings inside of her towards Loihau. She's in love with Loihau. And now she's angry with Madame Pele. Oh, so angry. She burned the whole east side of the island. So now Hi'iaka, not always remaining chaste, always just doing what she needs to do. She knows Loihau's to be saved from Madame Pele, but now she's so bitter and angry. She gathers everybody in the canoe. They head back to the hilo. They climb the slopes of the Kilauea volcano. They arrive at the crater Halima'uma'u. Hi'iaka takes Loihau and plants a big old kiss right on the lips. That's the G version. It's all good though. So Hi'iaka, or Madame Pele, comes quickly out of the lake of fire and kills Loihau again. Casting him into the lake of fire, it's always the guys that get themselves into these things. I don't know why that is. She casts Loihau into the lake of fire. Hi'iaka dives into the lake of fire after Loihau, digging deeper and deeper into the volcano. Rocks were said to fly out. The locals say, "Stop, Hi'iaka, stop, or you'll put out the fires of Pele." And the story culminates and finishes up finally with Hi'iaka capturing up to Loihau. She reanimates him again, and they live happily ever after out in the Puna forest. Every time that Madame Pele burns the forest, Hi'iaka is the bringer of life to the forest, as she's the goddess of life after the destruction of Madame Pele. So the different aspects of the volcano are the ohana of Madame Pele. I call it a mini operetta. It's quite a story, isn't it? So the different aspects of the volcano are the personification of the mountain to help the natives better understand life on the side of an active volcano. And they had to have a reason during what the geologists say are two of the most dramatic volcanic eruptions that ever happened to the people. First was the burning of the Puna forest. And with such a traumatic thing for a native culture, they would have had to know why. Why would Madame Pele do this to us? And the answer was in the story, my friends, because it took Hi'iaka too long to get back home from Kauai with Loihau. That's why she burned the Puna forest. The personification of the mountain to help the natives better understand the anger of a volcano, as the glowing above is one of Madame Pele's sisters, and the rumbling up above, below is one of her brothers. To personify a mountain to better understand it as a demigod, never a god that was worshipped, never a god that was sacrificed to, but always a natural environment to be respected, totally respected. And like an angry woman, you never know how she's going to erupt. So the geologists up at the park talk about this story, and they talk about these two most dramatic volcanic eruptions, and the remnants of which is what we're seeing today up at the national park. So I love sharing the geology of the island and the way the geologists would share the geology, but first in the way the Hawaiians would share the geology. So now I'm going to try to tie it together for you a little bit. As the geologists talk about the 1490 eruption, the eruption that was what they consider the burning of the Puna forest. A 60-mile lava tube, we know, is the Thurston, but we're going to skip him. It's the Nahuku lava tube. The Nahuku lava tube, estimated originally a 60-mile long lava tube all the way out the east side of the island, responsible for the burning of the whole east side of the island, a 1490 eruption. At the time of the 1490 eruption, the volcano was 1,000 feet taller than it is today. And the mass void left underground in 1490 from the burning and the eruption of the whole east side of the island left a big crater chamber inside. Now it all collapsed upon itself, creating what we see today, a 9-mile crater, 2.5 miles across, with a lava lake in the middle of it. The lava lake is opened up in 2006, is expanded now to over 600 feet, the size of 3 football fields. Huge. Huge. And so a 9-mile around, 2.5 miles across, and the inner crater is 1.5 miles across that. All formed in the 1490 eruption with the burning of the Puna forest, and that's what we're seeing today, according to the geologists. So the second most dramatic volcanic event ever witnessed by the Hawaiian culture and confirmed by the geologists up at the park is the digging of the pit crater, the crater Halima'uma'u, and the deflation of the 1790 eruption. The 1790 eruption, the crater Halima'uma'u in the center of the pit crater that we see today, deflated. Depending upon obstructions in the plumbing system, Pu'u'o'o is where the current eruption site is, 6 miles outside of the park. The plumbing system connecting all these massive volcanoes together. Even Haleakala is considered an active volcano, last erupted in 1900. Not all that long ago, still holds a heat signature and still connected in the underground plumbing system. Depending upon obstructions in that plumbing system, changes can happen. The 1790 eruption, the lava lake deflated. It deflated down to a point of 2,000 feet. Water started to come into the volcano. When it reached the water table, the steam-powered volcanic eruption that happened in 1790 would have gone 33,000 feet in the air, seen over the top of every mountain, ash and debris in the upper jet stream, and nobody would not have known about the 1790 eruption, and they would have had to tell their children about it. And they did, in the Holomaipele story. And so the lava tube to Nahuku also used the flow of the 1790 eruption. So when I do the tour and the excursion through the lava tube, I hold the light up and I talk about the two different eruptions and the massive river of lava that burned the whole east side of the island. And I tell the people as they look through the cracks, and it's like, this is the story. This is the one from the story. This is the burning of the Puna forest, and this is the 33,000 foot event right here, the geology of the island, shared first in the story of the Holomaipele, and then shared with what the geologists say is the Kona, the reason they would have told that story to their children. And so I find it a really wonderful experience to be able to share the things I've come to love and learn about the island, and I've got a lot more. And so we're about to wrap it up for the day, so I'm just going to kind of finish it up. Everybody knows Aloha Oi, but I kind of do it a cappella as I finish up my day, kind of make the connection for people. And so I tell people about Queen Liliuokalani, as how she wrote the farewell song, Aloha Oi, as a fond farewell as she went on a world tour all the way around the island, around the world. She shared the song everywhere she went because there are no words for goodbye in Hawaiian language. The words Aloha Aiao, until we meet again.